How's it going, my evil residents? I know, it is time. We're finally going to do one of the hot takes videos that I've talked about doing a few different times in my community posts on this channel. We're finally going to do it. We're doing it right now. We're going to go over all of your hot takes that I asked for on the Discord and in my community tab right now. All of your hot takes for Resident Evil 7. I'm going to go through them and I'm just going to respond to them pretty directly. Some of you had pretty similar hot takes. If that's the case, if I responded to your hot take in a previous one I covered as I go through them, I might give you a little bit shorter of a response, but that's not because I hated your hot take or something. I just don't want the video to be 50 minutes long of me repeating myself, and I don't think anyone else wants that, and honestly it would just make for a boring video. So if your hot take is similar to somebody else's, I will still bring it up on the video. Probably just going to re-summarize what I said for, but I'm not going to go as in depth as I did the first time if two hot takes are very similar. Also, two people said the same exact thing, probably not as much of a hot take as you think. Anyway, I won't waste any more of your time. Let's get right into the video, starting with our channel members. We are going to go over their hot takes first. First up, we have a hot take from Lady Dimitrescu in my Discord, aka Miss Belladonna. I don't know if this is a hot take or not, or if it's cold. The final boss in RE7 is the worst in any of the games. It's way too simple and not engaging. I'm not totally sure if it being simple, if finding it simple and not engaging is a hot take. I think pretty much everyone thinks that, but thinking it's the absolute worst, I think that is a hot take, because there's some pretty bad bosses in this game, and honestly, I would rather a boss be easy and poorly designed than really hard and poorly designed, because some bosses are just not fun to fight at all. Main example, Tyrant in the airplane, Code Veronica. No, I would much rather fight Wall Evelyn than that thing ever again. No thank you. Same thing for the Bat boss in Resident Evil 0. No thank you. No, I'd rather fight Wall Evelyn. I see this criticism levied at Resident Evil 7 a lot, but nobody talks about when Resident Evil 2 Remake did the same thing in the B scenario. Nobody talks about that. Just fight Birkenwall at the end. Nobody brings that up. Nobody. Moving on to my other channel members, we have Blaze MBZ. Resident Evil 7 is a good game, just the least interesting one in my humble opinion. Bakers are great, but Evelyn is outshined by them, and the molded, all types, are really bland and boring enemies to fight. Also, I think it would have worked better as a hard reboot because it doesn't really link to any other games previously, and it's got a more modern RE1 feel. It's a great game, but it does have a few flaws. I agree pretty much agree. Aside from it being a reboot, I think it being separate from the other games doesn't mean that it should be a reboot, because if it's a reboot and it's completely separate anyway, it doesn't matter either way too much. Chris is involved very little either way. It doesn't play much into any other Resident Evil game. It plays most directly into 8, but that's still pretty separate because he's Rogue in that. So it being a reboot either way is kind of inconsequential to how relevant this game is to the rest of the series. So I don't think it has to be a reboot. If it is a reboot, that's fine. If it's not, whatever. I don't really care either way. I'm glad that the story is kind of continuing in some sort of way, but also I would prefer it continue in a more direct way. As for the Bakers being great and outshining Evelyn, that is 100% true. Evelyn is a very flat milquetoast character, and any sympathy or character building she has built up in files that are optional to read and are just not that interesting, which is not good storytelling. So yeah, I pretty much always agree. I pretty much agree with this across the board. Next up, another one from Blaze MBZ. He also left one in my Discord. Hey everyone, hope everyone is doing well. You too. Hot take I have is RE7 and Village should have been a reboot for the series or an alternate timeline events to allow for crazier and wild concepts such as ghosts and weird poltergeist POWs. Should have made them less jarring in my humble opinion. So this is just kind of expanding on the second half of last hot take, which I kind of agreed with. If they went this direction with it, with adding ghosts and poltergeists and stuff like that, I would agree with you that it should be a completely whole reboot. I understand people that would want them to be a hard reboot, but instead of doing that, I think it either should just be a separate series from Resident Evil, as Resident Evil is very much like experimental science type stuff, not as much ghosts and things like that. I think that's hard to land scientifically, if that makes sense. It's very much into the magic mystical realm of things, in my opinion. So I think it should just be left for a separate series. So instead of rebooting it, just kind of rework into a different series like they did with Devil May Cry and the original Resident Evil 4 that they were working on. So I think that's what they should do with this. Maybe not reboot, just make a separate similar series like they did with Devil May Cry that has like Resident Evil vibes but with ghosts. I think that would be really good. Next up, we have another member hot take from Max the Noodle. I think the ship part is a little overhated. It has a really good atmosphere and it shows behind the scenes what Mia was actually doing. I know know, it feels like a labyrinth. Ain't that like 60% of the game? So as someone that really hates the boat section, it falls into the same problems that like the Outlast games have for me, of just kind of feeling like a walking simulator sometimes. I don't like those. So the whole Mia part of it, where you maybe fight like 2 enemies, I just think it's boring as fuck. I'd rather watch a cutscene so I can go to the bathroom or skip it. And the last half of it that you play, where you're actually trying to figure out the 2 parts to go into the rest of the boat, that part is more fine. It's not that it feels like a labyrinth. Once you play it once, you know the exact path to take, and it's just really tedious because you don't have to fight any enemies, and if you do, they're all really easy. Get access to Estim, and you have those mines that just absolutely nuke everything, and none of the ship levels really look that unique or interesting. It's all just bland gray boats, so that's why I don't like it, but I do respect this. This is quite a hot take. I've never heard anyone say that they like parts of the boat section. I understand why you like it, but I just don't. Sorry. Next up, from last channel member Maya, hot take that food looked kind of good. No, this is the hottest take in this video. I feel firm saying that right now. This is the hottest take in the whole video. I can't even argue. And Maya also shared another hot take via my Twitter DMs. By the way, go subscribe to Maya. She makes really good videos. My hot take is that RE7 didn't save the Resident Evil franchise because it just wasn't dying. I don't know why people say that. I'm glad they went back to doing actual horror. Yeah, RE6 sucked, but the franchise was not dying. LMAO. I pretty much agree with, yeah. Resident Evil 6 wasn't gonna kill the franchise. I think that's proven by the fact that they still made a few spin-off games after Resident Evil 6 came out that were, successful. I think one of them wasn't successful, but that's just because the game sucked. Like, they made Revelations 2, and I think Mercenaries 3D came out after RE6. Don't quote me on that. Not totally sure. I think the action direction is fine for Resident Evil. It's just that specific game they didn't like mechanics of, but if they dialed it back to something closer to RE4 or 5, I think franchise could have kept smooth sailing as action horror. I think it would have been totally fine. They just needed to rear back the action a little bit. What I think RE7 did succeed in doing is recapturing a new audience that liked the idea of old Resident Evil, or captures people that like scary games but don't like stuff like Outlast or other walking simulator type horror like game. I think it really captured those people, and that's why Resident Evil 7 kind of had a new renaissance, because those other action shooter people had other games to go to, but these people of the new audience it brought in kind of didn't have other things to play. There wasn't really Dead Space active. You maybe had Evil Within, that's a bit, but even then that came out right before the Resident Evil games started to come out, so there wasn't too much for you. The closest thing you had was maybe like Alien Isolation, but even then that doesn't quite scratch the same itch as Resident Evil does. So I think that's why Resident Evil 7 was so successful. Resident Evil 6 still outsold Resident Evil 7. I'm like 99% sure. I'm 90% sure Resident Evil 6 still outsold RE7. So clearly a lot of people were still interested in Resident Evil even after not liking Resident Evil 6. They just didn't like the specific mechanics of that game. I pretty much agree with this. I don't think that RE7 should be viewed as the one that like saved the franchise. It just kind of grabbed a new audience that it had before, but also just a whole brand new audience, because the whole horror landscape for gaming was just different. That still kind of is. Next up, our channel booster, Mr. X, has 2 hot takes. The 21 DLC is better than Not a Hero. I agree. Thank you. Somebody fucking said it. The 21 DLC in Resident Evil 7 is so good. It does more for Lucas's character than the main game did. Really shows off how maniacal he is in a less kind of predictable setting. Yeah, you kind of expect how it turns out to turn out, but it still has a lot more twists and turns, and the gameplay is genuinely nerve-wracking. This is the most nerve-wracking, scary game. This is the most nerve-wracking, scary section of the entire game. It's not even close. The amount of stress I feel playing a card, the amount of stress I feel pressing hit me, oh my god. The amount of frustration I had trying to beat it on Survival Plus. I was about ready to rip my fucking hair out. This game mode is so good, so underrated. More people need to go play this. Sure, if you don't like card games, it's gonna be boring, but no, this game mode is fire. Thank you for saying that. Evelyn is actually the worst RE villain. I don't think this is completely true, because Mother Miranda is even more dry than Evelyn is, and I will stand by that. So she's not quite the worst. I do think this is a hot take, because I feel like people just don't think of Evelyn when they think worst RE villain. At least I don't think so. There's a couple other hot takes that kind of say something similar though, so maybe I'm wrong. Maybe I'm just not in the right corners of the internet. But yeah, I don't think she's objectively the worst, because she has a little bit more going on than someone like Mother Miranda, but yeah, she's not great. Getting into the regular hot takes, first from my Discord and then the YouTube ones. One Up says RE7 has no replay value after the 3rd playthrough. This is 100% true, because you play it on normal, then you play it on Madhouse, and then you do all the challenges in one playthrough. I've seen everybody does it. Everyone plays the same, all 3 or 4 of the extra challenges in one playthrough. No healing, no item box, and they just do it on. So I pretty much agree with that. I agree with this pretty hard. As someone that speedran this game for a little bit, don't replay this game more than like 3-4 times. It's not worth it. It's not worth it. I 100% agree with this. Next up, Dr. Payne says, not sure if this is a hot take, but the setting, map, and bosses of RE8 are so much cooler than RE7. Also, they share the same automag. If you want to see which one looks better, watch the RE7 weapons ranked. Go watch RE7 weapons ranked. It was my first video. It's not very good, but it's also pretty good. I kind of find the opposite to be true. I also just like Texas Chainsaw Massacre, which is the main inspiration of this game. So I just love the setting and atmosphere and vibes of RE7. I'm not too into the vibes of RE8 aside from Castle Dimitrescu and the factory. Everything else I could leave. RE4 did better. That's just how I feel about that. It kind of just comes down to preference. I do think more people prefer RE8 overall setting because it has a little more going on as far as like lore and stuff like that. Most of the lore of location in RE7 is just on the Bakers. So I understand why people would think this. I'm not sure how hot of a take it. Next up from Nokotan. RE7 was good for the series growth and a good change, but it isn't a very good game. Okay, I kind of agree. Some of the stuff in this game is just, it's really clear that it's the first RE engine game. It has bad enemy variety. The bosses are either easy or frustrating. The world space isn't as big as it seems, and it relies a lot more so than other Resident Evil games on you just not knowing where things are to feel like it's a long game. I feel like those are the three main cons of it that make me think it's not a super great Resident Evil game. The main thing it has going for it is atmosphere, but even then, there's just glaring graphical problems with this game that really take me out of it, that other RE engine games don't have. It's 100% the result of it just being the first RE engine game. Like at the end when Evelyn like crumbles into rocks and they become literally like 240p rocks. Oh my god, it looks so bad. Some of like the goo looks really gross and bad, but not in like a good way like it's supposed to. Some stuff just doesn't look as good in this game as it should, and Resident Evil 2 Remake that came out like right after this doesn't really have this problem. It just looks good throughout. Some of the character models just don't animate right. Some of the dialogue doesn't line up, but that's all nitpick. So it's okay. I think it's an okay. It's 6-7 out of 10. I don't think it's like top tier Resident Evil. I think the atmosphere is top tier Resident, but even then it's knocked down by some stuff just as a result of it not being old enough to look retro. It just looks a little dated. I'm not sure how hot of a take this one is either, honestly. I either hear people say Resident Evil 7 is best or the worst, but I don't hear isn't a very good game very often. So again, not sure where this lands on the hot take meter, but I do kind of agree. Next up from Shadowfire. RE7 was great up until the final battle with Jack Baker. Towards the end, I think the game actually started the ship section with one of the strongest points in the game being a pure horror game with no way to protect yourself. Issue isn't that you got a gun, it's that when you get the weapons, the level becomes a rather confusing mess with extremely easy enemies to deal with. The mines are just pretty bad, can't defend. I 100% agree with this take. For the boat section, I don't like the walking segment though. That is the one thing I disagree with on. I just think it's boring as fuck. The game had the atmosphere down when you had guns still, so I don't think taking away the guns added to the atmosphere any. It just made it boring. The enemies are too easy. It's either a labyrinth that makes no sense, or you've already done it, so you just know where to go, so it's boring. It doesn't have any like fun gameplay mechanics really. It's just boring or annoying. No in between. And then the mines are just bad. It's just linear gray 2 boring. So yeah, I 100% agree with this. RE7, as soon as you do the final Jack fight, downhill from there, all boring. Next up from Skylad31, he has two hot takes. Character of Zoe was poorly written. 100% true. 100% true. I'm gonna call this a pretty hot take because I never hear anyone talk about it, therefore nobody has an opinion on it. But yeah, Zoe is a very poorly written character. I might make a separate video on this, so I'm not going to go too into it, but she just kind of lets things happen, and she's cryptic and creepy, comes off evil just for the sake of you not trusting her when it makes no sense for her to go. So yeah, she's very poorly written, she's not consistent at all, and she's only good in the daughters. That's it. Next up, Skylad31's second take. Crawler Molded is the worst enemy in the whole Resident Evil franchise. Okay, I'm gonna say this in the nicest way possible. If you hate the Crawler Molded, it's just a skill issue. They're not that hard. That is my hot take. I hear this all the time that the Crawler Molded suck. They're not that bad. They're the only hard enemy in the game, which is why I'm like, don't remove them. They're the only hard enemy in the game. Keep them. But even then, one shotgun shot will always kill them, and they always have some kind of wind up before they attack you. They always spawn in front of you, so they're not that hard. They're hard, and Ethan must die. I do agree that they're kind of aids, and Ethan must die. And in the one Chris section of Not a Hero, when you're trapped in the little room with like enemy showdown, they're annoying there because you can't really dodge them. But otherwise, Crawler Molded aren't that bad. It's a skill. Sorry, bud. And I mean that in the nicest possible way. No hate to anyone that dislikes Crawling Molded. I just think they're not that hard. I've also played this game way too much, so that could just be part of the problem. Next up, hot take from YB. From what I've seen, RE6 and 7/8, that there's barely any campaign concept art scrapped from RE6, while 7 and 8 have a lot. I think the main issue is they felt afraid to use too much and overcomplicate the game, so they narrow down their ideas as much as possible, leaving a well-finished product that lacks any extra flair. Issue that 4 and most of 5 didn't deal with, since both games were basically remade during development 2 or 3 times. This is 100%. I feel like, at least from what I've seen, the RE7 was going to have a more fleshed out boat section, and the mine section were going to be fleshed out, which is why the Not a Hero deal takes place there. And then there would be more stuff going on in the swamp, which again is why Joe's swamp section exists for the DLC. They just kind of took those cut concepts and expanded them into DLC, which is good, but also it makes the main game feel kind of linear and short on replays because you're not experiencing as many occasions. I agree 100% with this. They were so worried about both finding the game too actiony or like too over the top. They wanted to keep it too grounded, too realistic, but also they don't like at all. So I don't really understand completely why Capcom does this for RE7 and 8. I just hope for RE9 they come up with good ideas, they execute on them, and we don't get any amazing concept art like Plague Doctor Ada Wong. Oh my god, this could have been in Resident Evil 8. We never got it. Next up, moving on to the YouTube hot takes from Amy13. RE7 is probably the closest game in the franchise to the first Resident Evil. It's explicit on its core gameplay, and RE7 is easily the second worst numerical game in terms of replayability. Unskippable cutscenes, really hidden items that almost force you to use psychostimulants, and low enemy variety. Comparing with RE1 Remake, if hunters didn't exist, it would be boring just like RE7. Okay, as far as the level flow, I 100% agree. You go from main house, guest house, a little bit of outside section, main house 2, then you go on to like quote unquote lab section, which is replaced with barn and Lucas's house area, and then where the game mainly deviates is at the end, where you do the boat and the mines versus for park labs for RE1. That's kind of where that deviates, but the first half of the game, yeah, completely copy paste from the original Resident. But the original Resident Evil, the last half of the game is really, really good, and still really the last half of RE7 is not. And I think that's kind of where the difference is. As for the hidden items thing, it's a little much in RE7. I understand what they were going for. It's hard to hide items like you would in Resident Evil 1 Remake with the fixed cameras and still make it fair and not bullshit. So I understand where this criticism comes from, but I don't know how they would fix it. Unskippable cutscenes is a huge 100% agree. The fact I can't skip the cutscenes in this game pisses me off so much, why I rarely. Next up, the hot take from Aphex Loser. Resident Evil 7 is boring, doesn't even really feel like a Resident Evil. For this one, I don't think RE7 is necessarily boring as much as it is just not replayable. Your first playthrough, it's fun, it's engaging, it's really good, but when you replay it, it's so linear. All the optional stuff, there's too much optional stuff in this game, but also there's not enough optional stuff in this game that benefit you clearly. The only one I can think of is skipping the shotgun to get the second shotgun first. That's the only thing I can really. As far as it not feeling like a Resident Evil game, I don't understand this criticism for most games when people are like, it's a good X game, just not a good. It's a good game, just not a good X franchise game. Because like, especially for stuff like Resident Evil, where most of the games feel pretty different, what the fuck does that mean? No hate to this person, obviously, but like, I just think this is like, it's the most subjective criticism framed in the most objective way possible, and it just comes off really disingenuous, and I just don't like to engage with it because there's no way to come to any sort of conclusion, because everyone's perception of things is different. Yeah, things are objectively what they are, but how you perceive it to be and what you think makes it is different from what I think makes it. Like when it's like talking about a sandwich, okay? It's a good sandwich. It's just not good. It's like if you were having a sub sandwich and you said it's a good sandwich. It's just not a Subway sandwich. It's like, okay, but I still like it or I dislike it. But what really makes it different than a Subway sandwich if it tastes exactly the same, but it just wasn't made at a sub? I don't know if that's quite the perfect comparison, but I have a really hard time engaging with this argument, not because I don't agree sometimes, because sometimes I kind of do, but I just feel like it's a very subjective feeling to say something doesn't feel like something else, but this is framed very objectively whenever I hear this. Again, it's not personal to Aphex Loser, it's just something I hear a lot that I just like. This is not targeted directly at this. I don't like this type of video game criticism / discussion. I think it's kind of disingenuous, and I don't think it really benefits anything at all. Saying like, this is good, it just doesn't feel like what it's supposed to, because as I said, it's all subjective how you feel about it. I've ranted about this enough. Moving on. Next up from Chleb5778. After your first playthrough, you should have an option at the start of the game to skip directly to Mia's boss fight. Yes, please, 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 Capcom, hear this. Capcom! Add a skip button at the beginning of RE7 and my life is yours. This is definitely not a hot take, but I cannot shout loud enough from the top of the mountains how much I... Next up from Chumpa223. Resident Evil 7 is too slow, and the horror aspect of it gets too boring too quickly. I understand it's slow paced, but dang. I think the reason that it feels slow and not in the same way as the originals is because in the originals, enemies were oppressive until you really learned how to deal with them. Whereas in this game, they're easy as fuck. They are no threat to you at all. Even on the hardest difficulty, the only thing that's a threat to you is the bosses. And as long as you have the shotgun, you can still unlock anything out of your way. If you have the saw, you can still unlock anything out of your way. It no threat at all. It doesn't take a learning curve like dodging the zombies does in Resident Evil 1. You don't handle it right in Resident Evil 1, you're gonna die. You don't handle it right in Resident Evil 7, take a little bit of damage and you move on. It's really not a hard game at all. Even on even on Madhouse mode, it's just, it doesn't have the same good balancing of Resident Evil 1, and that's why it feels slow and boring. Next up from Cosmic X, the intro sequence is way too long. You should just spawn at the dinner table. The rest should be cutscenes. I just covered this with the skip to Mia's boss fight one. I think that's a better place to skip to, honestly. But yeah, the intro was way too long. Resident Evil 3 Remake has the same problem, except it's literally a third of the length, so it's not as painful. But I 100% agree. Sorry, this is a little short, but I just talked about this. Next up from Crazy Shark 8000, Evelyn's reveal and boss fight was underwhelming. True, because it's just, it doesn't change that much about the game. It's like, oh no, there's mold in this house and they're being controlled. And then you move on to find out, oh no, there's mold in this house and they're being controlled by a little girl that Mia was involved with. Her reveal doesn't change anything about the game. It just adds a final boss. That's literally all it does. And I think that's why it's underwhelming, because it doesn't reframe anything previous in the game. The only thing it reframes is that Granny was actually a child the whole time, or the child was actually Granny the whole time. And that's just like, oh neat, oh wow, that's cool, but it doesn't really change that much about the game. Next up from Disabled Sean, I never understood the hate for the boat section. Also, having unskippable cutscenes in the modern game is unacceptable, but I don't think that's a hot take. Yeah, I don't think that's a hot take either, but not understanding the hate for the boat section is definitely a hot take, because doing this video, hearing your guys' hot takes is the first time I've heard anyone defend the boat section. Y'all are insane, and that is one of the hottest takes in the video aside from the food looking good. But like, I don't like the boat section. I'm sorry, I think it's boring. So it's more of a walking section than the rest of the game is. Next up from EJ2Rim, RE7 Chris is the best looking Chris in all of Resident Evil. I take back what I said about the food looking really good being the hottest take in this video. This is the hottest take in this video. I have not once ever seen a single soul claim that. I think his voice is fine. I think his look is okay. I covered this in my Why We Love Chris video. Go watch it, please. It didn't do very well, but he looks like Code Veronica Chris, and it just kind of ignores RE5, RE6, Revelations 1 as far as looks completely, and it annoys a lot. And that's the main reason I don't like it. As is, if Chris didn't look the way he does or didn't appear in those, I wouldn't mind it nearly as much. Next up from Ethan Kasanik, the ship part with Ethan is just as scary as the Baker Mansion. I'm gonna give this a fat no, because the only reason, also this is an incredibly hot take, scorching take. At least I think so. I never found the boat section scary, and I haven't heard being like, the boat section is so terrifying, except for like 3 people. But the main reason the mansion is scary is because of Jack Baker. Jack Baker's honestly the only scary thing in the game, at least to me. So he's not in the boat section, and he's the only thing that makes the mansion scary. So I think the mansion is scary by default. But I kind of understand where you're coming from. If you don't like water or like creaky boat, I kind of understand. Next up from Ewok Gaming 832, the game should have ended when you choose between Zoe and Mia. The entire ship segment just drags on and isn't really fun at all. Yes, they should have added like maybe like a swamp section in the middle of after the guest house in Mansion 2, where you do stuff in the swamp, maybe visit Joe's cabin, involve him in that area, add that section, and just remove the end of the game, skip right to the boss fight. Maybe have a really small section on the boat, but then you can just have like a 10-minute Mia playable section. Cut it down to 10 minutes. It's in the past explaining why she has the neurotoxin thing. She says, oh, it must have crashed off the ship. So you go to the swamp area to go get that device. It plays out the same as the mines, but it's cooler because it's in a swamp and it's not fucking gray. And then you go back to the guest house, and the end of the game from there plays on the exact same, but maybe give Evelyn a better boss fight. There you go, Capcom. I'm here all week. Next up, from Killer Moth, 7 has janky controls. This is 100% true. Crouching feels really weird. Aiming feels really weird. It all adds to try to make the game more scary and make you feel like you're untrained, and it kind of sets you up to make you feel like you're scared, but it just doesn't work. And I think it's kind of aged poorly, especially since they've done this better in stuff like Resident Evil 2 Remake. It feels much better there. Accomplishes the same goal, but it's just better and does not feel janky. I don't think this is a hot take. I've heard people complain about this before, so I'm gonna give this like a slightly hot take. It's like a warm take. Next up, from Lebo the Alright, 5543. RE7 has the most boring enemies to fight IMO. Bakers are really cool and have some great fights, but the molded get old fast. There just isn't enough variety of them, and you overcome them pretty easily, at least to me. Also, the flamethrower to me was very underwhelming and falls off quick. I barely use the flamethrower. I talked about this in my Resident Evil 7 weapons ranked video, that I don't think it's as useful as the game implies that it is. It's literally only good for clearing bugs, but even then, you just do that with some other weapons and save a lot of inventory space, so it's not that big of a deal. Also, this is a pretty cold take. Most people think that RE7 has the most boring enemies in any Resident Evil game. This is pretty true. This is almost pretty objectively true. Most people think this, so I don't think it's a hot take, but yes, you are right. Next up, my name is Neo369 says, most people suck at the Jack Baker fight, just slash and duck. I'm assuming you're talking about the chainsaw one. Yeah, people that complain about this one just forget that you can crouch. It's really easy, and you can also stun lock him with the saw. Look up any speedrun. It's really funny. I have seen people struggle on this fight though, and I'm always just like, you can crouch below most of his attacks, and they go, what? Yeah, I don't know if this is necessarily a hot take. I'd say it's like a warm take, but yeah, if you're having trouble with Jack Baker's chainsaw fight, just quit. Next up, from Resident Evil Enjoyer 0314, this is another hot take about the boat, but he says it has redeeming qualities, just like the claustrophobic feel coming back, and you get the PP Bison, which is fun. PP, I said PP, go crazy comment. And yeah, it's he says it doesn't meet the level of the rest of the game's creepiness, but it's not horrible. I think it's just not scary at all, but again, fear is completely subjective, almost complete. There's some stuff that's like objectively your brain is wired to be scared of. This game doesn't really delve into that kind of stuff. Yeah, I've talked about this at length. This is a pretty hot take because, as I said, y'all defending this in the comments for this are the only people that I've ever heard defend the boat section. So yeah, I don't mean to skip over yours, but I've talked about this at length at this point. Next up, from Row8213, this isn't a hot take, but I think every cutscene being unskippable kills its replay value. 100% true. Just to be thorough, I'm including this. I've already talked about this, and I didn't want you to feel like you got skipped over, so here I am mentioning it. Yeah, you're 100% right. Next up, from Sir Jebediah the Fourth, Lucas Baker's one of those soy jack pictures. Yeah, you're right. This is true. I don't know if this is on any sort of temperature take, but yeah, he definitely is. Next up, from Sonic the Legend 8741, best Resident Evil game. This is crazy. No way. No, I think I've maybe seen like 2 people put this as their best Resident Evil game. No fucking ways this is the best Resident Evil game. It's short, has no replay value, has shitty enemy variety, has mediocre bosses, has some questionable graphical decisions that don't age well at all, has milquetoast characters, has semi-interesting lore, and it's carried immensely by some of its pretty neat puzzle and its atmosphere. So no, it's not the best Resident Evil game. I respect it. I respect whatever you like. Of course, whatever. I'm not gonna be one of those people that's like, how dare you like this game? How dare you like this game? But just respectfully, no. No. Next up, from the Cash 6880, I've always found the stupid choice to save Zoe or Mia in the end, where you leave with Mia or alone. Come on, game, let me leave with Zoe alive and don't kill her right after my choice to save her. Yeah, there's a comment reply to this that pretty much just sums up my opinion on this. Give us a new section as Zoe instead of just having us play as Mia either way. I mean, it's that simple. It's that simple. That would fix the issue. It just feels inconsequential because the game plays out almost exactly the same. Just skip a repeat of Mia's boss fight easy. Next up, from the Republic of Ireland, Jack was more terrifying than Mr. X. 100%. I 100% agree. Jack is more scary, and he's also cooler. At least I think so. I'm pretty sure this is a hot take because I mostly, especially with general public, people really are terrified of Mr. X. But I think Jack is scary. I 100% agree with this. I'm going to consider this a hot take. I only hear like hardcore Resident Evil fans agree with this, but as far as general population, they mostly like Mr. X. So yeah, 100% agree. Good hot take. Next up, from the milkshake Marxist. Capcom did an awful job balancing Joe and End of Zoe. He's either paper thin or incredibly strong depending on what difficulty you play and how many items you've unlocked. Additionally, as far as I'm aware, you can't get the only guns you need achievement on Joe Must Die due to a set piece needing to be shot. You can technically get, I know exactly what you're talking about. You can technically do it, but you need to have all the boxer effigies to tank a specific, like a specific section. And then there is, I've seen it done, but I don't remember if it was a glitch that they were able to do it or the puzzle, like to destroy the to finish that section. If it's just people just mostly do it wrong, if it's like not explained well. But I've seen people do it, like they boot up they boot up End of Zoe to get all like the trophies. I've seen it in like trophy videos. I'm pretty sure it's possible. It's just bullshit. So it basically is impossible for like the general person. But yeah, 100% agree. Joe Must Die is horribly balanced. It's as horribly balanced as Ethan Must Die, but it's worse. It's 100% worse. Don't play Joe Must Die unless you literally are like someone who's super into BDSM, because it's not fun. Next up, from the Shaded Stalker, Lucas's section of the game feels rushed and isn't nearly as scary as Jax or Marguerite's was. I agree that it's kind of rushed because the barn section is kind of boring, but the actual puzzle room I really like, but I also just really like the Saw franchise, so I'm kind of biased there. But I understand how it could come off like this because, again, barn section is just kind of just there for the Lucas fight. It's just kind of there. It kind of serves as padding before you get into the Saw section. So yeah, kind of agree. I always hear nothing but praise for this section, so I'm going to consider this a hot take. Next up, from user TB4 T3KJ3R, RE7 is overrated. I agree. And I say that as someone that likes RE7. I know, despite everything I've complained about, it sounds like I don't like RE7, but I actually do, believe it or not, and I agree. It is 100% overrated. I do think it's a hot take though, because I think most people like this, so I'm considering this a hot take. Next up, from Yi0627. As much as I love RE7, part of me feels like it should have been a standalone title, not related to RE at all, but still uses the RE engine. I mean, I guess it wouldn't have been called that if they didn't name this game Resident Evil. Fun fact, wow, I just hit my head. The RE engine is not named Resident Evil engine. It's named Reach for the Moon engine. The name has nothing to do with Resident Evil. I think it's just a silly reference. But yeah, I agree. I think RE7 and 8 should have doubled down on their concept art stuff. And like another commenter said, like they should have doubled down on adding like ghosts and stuff like that and made it a separate franchise. 100% agree. They should have either dialed it back and made it more Resident Evil, or they should have strayed further and made it its own thing. One or the other. They kind of went for a half C, and I think the game suffered for it. The second to last hot take in this video from Zach the Guy. Ethan is not a good character in quotes. He somehow has a personality and no personality at the same time. Also, the story itself is just very predictable. IMO, crazy southern family, little girl is the source of it all, jump scares. I mean, yeah, I can't disagree. This is pretty on point. In the Ethan's character thing, he was purposefully written to be as bland as possible so that he was a self-insert. That's why he's so bland. So in that aspect, he's written well. He's written as he's supposed to be. Do I think that works well for the game? No, I don't. I don't think it works well for the game. He's just as boring as the fucking Fallout 4 protagonist, and that guy's literally whoever you want him to be, just because he's default white guy. Gotta go save my wife. Gotta go save my wife. Gotta go to a stupid location and save my wife from God knows what the fuck. It's boring and it's over, and he doesn't have anything to his character in the first game besides that it's funny when he says the F word. The last hot take in the whole video is anticlimactically one that we've already talked about. This game saved RE. It's one of the worst ones, and it's one of the least replayable. It is 100% one of the least replayable. I don't think it saved RE. I just think it brought in a whole new swath of people that were not into the action end of things, that were looking for something that didn't have a niche to be filled, which was horror with some action. That niche was kind of unfilled in the horror market. Resident Evil went back to some of its roots and filled it nearly perfectly. Go on to fill it more perfectly later with the remakes. At least I think so. Yeah, this is pretty, as far as the saved RE one, that's not a hot take, but I also think that is way overstated how much it did for the franchise. As for the second half of this, yeah, that's just true. Anyway, my throat hurts, and that is all of them. So that is gonna do it for this video. I hope you liked the video. I hope you were happy with how I responded to your hot take. If you have any more hot takes on the Resident Evil franchise, feel free to leave them in the comments. I will cherry pick them for when I go through each game and kind of cover them as I go. I'm probably going to do Resident Evil Village next, so if you want to leave a Resident Evil Village hot take in the comments, go for it. I would love to hear those. Just going in for your guys' knowledge, I'm not a huge fan of Resident Evil Village. I don't like that game very much. I don't like it as much as I like Resident Evil 7, so with that knowledge, put those hot takes down in the comments. I would love to hear them, because If they're negative, I'll probably agree with you. Aside from that, we do have a $10 channel member, Miss Belladonna. Shout out to her, and we also have many other homeless residents. Thank you very much for becoming a member. If you would like to also become a member, check out the perks below, the subscribe and like buttons in the description. Feel free to subscribe if you want more Resident Evil content like this. I also make COD Zombies content, and like the video if you liked it. Disliked it, feel free to dislike it, but let me know why in the comments. We do also have a Discord if you would like to shitpost, meme around, and chat with other residents, LFG, and stuff. That's gonna do it for this video, and yeah, stay evil, my residents.